Mobile Learning presents Bohm Jacopini's Structured Theorem. The Structured Theorem proposes that all problems can be solved using three logical constructs. The first of these constructs is sequence, and it's simply doing one thing after another. I want to share some examples of sequence, selection, and iteration with you. And so I've got some code that I've written in the Perl programming language to demonstrate how each of these logical constructs work. And we're going to start with sequence. And we're coming into a Perl program, and we're just doing one task after another. We're initializing hours, rate, and gross to be 0. We're then printing out a couple of strings to our display. The first one is an example of sequence. And then how many hours worked. Now, this statement gets the input from the keyboard. And then we print out pay rate. And we accept input from the keyboard and store it into rate. So now I have a value for hours and a value for rate. Then I print gross pay equals, and this code right here simply calls a subroutine that will perform the calculation for us. Whatever the result is displayed next. And then this is the subroutine that actually performs the math. And what it does is multiply the value in hours times the value in rate and stores it into gross. So let's see how this runs. And here's my window into Unix, so let's go ahead and let's run it. An example of sequence, how many hours? Well, let's say we worked 40 hours at $12.50 an hour. Our gross pay would be $500. So it works. That, my friends, is sequence. Selection is the second construct, and it tests a condition and does one thing if the condition is true, another if it's false. It's kind of like the psychology your parents used on you when they said, if you do the dishes, you can drive the car. If not, you're staying home. Now let's take a look at selection as it might be implemented in a Perl script. And I'm using the same kind of hourly pay algorithm in this script, but this time I'm checking for overtime hours. And the rules on overtime hours are you get paid overtime if you've worked more than 40 hours. And so I have this if statement. If the hours is GT greater than 40, then we're going to do whatever's in the brackets. So I'll set the premium equal to hours minus 40 times the pay rate divided by 2. Otherwise, we'll set premium to 0. So, if I've got more than 40 hours, I get a premium. If not, I don't. Let's see how it works. Just change the name here to protect the guilty from sequence to selection, and let's run it. There we go. We've got an example of selection. Let's calculate payroll. So let's say that our pay rate was $12.50 an hour. How many hours did I work? Well, let's say that we worked 50 hours. So our gross pay is now $687.50, of which $62.50 is our overtime premium. $62.50 is the overtime premium, which we only got because we worked more than 40 hours. That is selection. The last logical construct is iteration. Now, iteration is simply a fancy word that means repetition. To iterate is to repeat a task until it's time to stop. We often call this a loop. Okay, I've got one last example to share with you, and this one is an example of iteration. Now remember, iteration is where we repeat a task until it's time to quit. So, I start out, now this is sequence, I'm printing an example of iteration, and then I come down and I load an array, a matrix, whatever you want to call it, with some strings. Old MacDonald's Farm, Big Mac, Mackinac Bridge, Macaroni and Cheese, General Douglas MacArthur, and Ronald McDonald. Now, what do all of these have in common? The word Mac, M-A-C. Okay, so then I say I'm going to print the array using the for each control structure to format each element. And here's my for each. Now, what for each does is take each value from the array one at a time until it runs out of items, and then it stops. Then it's time to stop or time to quit. What will we do? Well, we piece together a string that consists of a tab, then the value of Mac, and a carriage return, and then we print that value out to our display. And when we get all done, we'll pause just to hold our display in place for a moment. So let's try this program. Again, I've got to simply change the name, so we're running the iteration Perl script. And there it is. Each one in turn. Old MacDonald's Farm, Big Mac, Mackinac Bridge, Macaroni and Cheese, General Douglas MacArthur, and your friend of mine, Ronald McDonald, in sequence, one at a time. That, my friends, is iteration.